Yeah. I think the big mistake people make is, well, there's two themes that I see. One is someone saying, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. Well, you're in the wrong business. This is a weeds. If you're not in the weeds, then who is? Maybe you have a partner who's in the weeds, but you need to be in the weeds. Now,
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out NoteMBA.com. Now, flying solo as today's host, Chase Thompson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I am Chase Thompson, joined normally by Robert Woods. Today is a little different. We had about a month there where Robby was off in Spain, and it was me getting an opportunity to do some really great interviews with some really great people. And today is a very similar opportunity, though he's not in Spain. I mean, he talked about how much he loved Barcelona and how much he'd rather be there than in the greatness that is Cook County, the greatness that is Chicago. He actually had to fly out this morning to take a look at some of the assets we have up there, as well as some assets that he has up there. And so he was unable to join us. But today I am joined by one of my favorite people in the note business. And he's relatively new to a lot of the people I know in the note business. So I don't know what that says about some of the other people I know in the real estate space. But he is, in fact, one of my favorite people in the space. He has a 20-year corporate career background with Proctor & Gamble and Pepsi Co. His actual real estate business, in its first 3 years, went from 0 to 60. And by 0 to 60, I mean 0 to 1,500 assets. Just crazy aggressive growth. They buy pools and all kinds of bands as far as value goes and all this kind of stuff. They're just an amazing company. Paul Birkett, Automation Finance. Sir, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
I feel much better now that you described it like it was really thought out and superbly well planned. So I feel much better about the business now.
There was no stub toes, right? There was like no stub toes. There was no difficulty along the way. It was just like wham, bam, right?
Yeah, plain sailing, I would say. Plain sailing. No, if I knew then what I knew now, we probably would have done it somewhat differently. But, it was certainly a steep learning curve. Continues to be, actually.
Yes, and to be honest, I had heard you talk a few times, but I had never really heard a ton of the background until one of the recent events that you had spoke at. And I thought that was a really interesting, situation. We can obviously start there. We can start a little bit with your background. I mean, if you'd like, you're just an interesting man about town as far as I'm concerned. You just have such a unique background from a lot of people that come to this space, and you've just been so aggressive with that growth plan. That I found the story to be fascinating with how, specifically you had told a story about, you had what was it? You had bought a large pool of notes, and then you had sent out a bunch of letters, and then you got a bunch of attorneys calling you or what have you. Can you just talk a little bit about how you guys got started and some of those pitfalls that maybe some of the smaller, newer investors wouldn't necessarily have a ton of understanding with, but they at least get the idea that you came from a really interesting space?
Well, I guess, when you start in any business, you don't know what you don't know. And as you say, I ended up in this business by complete accident. I came over, as you mentioned, I was a corporate guy, and I came to the US as a corporate relocation back in 2010. And I'd come from Asia before that, and actually Ireland, which is where I'm from originally.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're from all over, yeah.
And you thought we had a bad crash here in the US. I mean, they're still limping along in most of the Northern European economies because they have very, very debtor-friendly and very borrower-friendly kind of laws. And so it takes much longer for any kind of a deal to be done. And so they're still dealing with that hangover of the crash. But I got here, and I was actually at a corporate retreat, and I saw, as I always do, pick up those kind of local realtor magazines, and was flipping through the pages and saw what looked to be like really nice houses in Cape Coral and Fort Myers. I remember actually it was one of them, and I just couldn't believe you could buy a house for for just what seemed like a ridiculously cheap price. And I started then buying single family homes to rent, because I'd read somewhere, I think, that it's passive income, and passive income is terrific. And it's the least passive income you can imagine. We got to about 40 doors, and like all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and every night after work was dealing with property managers and all of the issues that come along. And I ended up in the note business because I was doing a short sale about 4 years ago, buying a short sale from PNC Bank. And the lady who was managing the short sale called me one day and said, "I'm sorry, we can't sell you that property because we've sold the note." And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, selling a note. I'd never even heard of the idea, because again, where I'm from, only banks and institutions can own mortgages. The idea of owning a mortgage to me was bizarre. So I started researching that, and I actually met the guy who bought the note that I was trying to buy. I ended up buying, and thinking I was doing a terrific deal, buying this duplex in an up-and-coming suburb in Philadelphia, and making whatever I made, 20 grand on 60 or 70 grand over 9 or 10 months. And, taking a lot of risk to do it. And that was the last piece of real estate I bought. I then spent the last 3 years selling everything and getting into the note space. And as you say, we bought a lot. We bought fast. We bought too fast in hindsight. I wouldn't recommend that anyone does what I did, but ended up growing to 7 or 8 people and 1,500 assets. And that sounds great until it's you experience the reality, which is 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, trying to manage that number of assets with a small team, without a huge history in the business, because we've my business partner came from PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's an accountant and an excellent systems guy, and I go and I find the loans and raise the money, and that's kind of how we dovetail together. And so far, so good. But I certainly wouldn't say it was the model for getting into this business. It was, in hindsight, probably a bit too much too soon, and a bit too much just work, really.
Did you gain all of like your gray hairs that you have now from that experience, or was that something that you brought into the business? Was that the reason? Is it systems? Is that really what it was? That you're talking about scaling too quickly. You're talking about being maybe too aggressive, but it seems like y'all are in a decent space. Though obviously I wasn't there those first 3 years and all the hours and all that, but obviously is it lack of team size, lack of systems, lack of experience, all the above? What was the amalgamation that kind of really put y'all in a space that you're just like, holy cow, what are we going to do now?
It's all of the above. It's like, I can't remember what the boxing analogy is. I'm not sure, is it Tyson or who is it, but he says, maybe it's Fraser, I don't know, but they say everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
I believe Tyson. I think that's gonna have to be the quote for the show. I like that.
I mean, it all sounds great, but I remember we bought a big pool of assets, about 200 loans in Chicago, and service transfer happened on Monday, let's say, and on Friday we got an attorney general complaint, and I didn't know what an attorney general complaint was. And then on the following Monday we got a qualified written response, and we'd had one before and it was pretty straightforward, and then just the floodgates opened. All the issues that had been pent up for months and months during service transfer opened the floodgates, and we were just overwhelmed. And these are not minor, admin things. These are significant, perils to your business if you don't handle them correctly. And so, to get to your point about systems, we didn't have a system because we didn't know we needed a system for that stuff. There was just so much that you needed to be unbelievably well prepared for. And what attracted me to this business is really that it's an operator's business. If you have a plan for every single thing that you need to do every day, and you just execute the hell out of the plan, and you have a system for everything, then you can scale, you can raise more capital, and you can do it at low risk. You're never sitting there going, I'm not sure what we should do with this, because there's a very clear plan for everything that comes in the door, for every asset that you buy, for every letter that you get, for every loan that you sell. we just tried to do it too fast.
Mm-hmm. And so on that topic, I mean, so you guys grew extremely fast. You're in a position that most people aren't necessarily going to be in, say, in the first 3 years that they have in the business. One quick caveat, was this due to your opportunity, say, with capital? I mean, most people necessarily would not be in that position in the first 3 years merely based off of relationships. You know, they might not have gotten to the point to have had enough capital at that point to really to execute, say, on a 700 pool purchase. You know what I mean? So was that a little bit of it? Like it sounds weird to say, but it's almost like you might have this reference point, you know, being from Europe, I guess, a little bit, but it's almost like, you know, the Yankees, right? They just have so much money that they go and they try to, you know, do maybe some things instead of building up that farm system, building up that, you know, that experience system. You know what I mean? I you know, I'm assuming in European football, there's probably got to be some corollary there, right? With some team that just has that. Did you have, say, a certain amount of capital that you were able to tap into that put you in that place that you just didn't realize was going to be the case?
I mean, a lot of this is luck. I had been, you know, okay. I'd been relatively successful corporate guy, like not a super successful guy. I was never going to be the CEO of Pepsi Co or anything like that. But I'd done okay, and I'd made, like, you know, middle of the pack kind of result at Pepsi Co.
Sure.
And then I bought a lot of single family homes. I got up to about 40, and they were doing very well. Like, they were making a good bit of money, and the story was a good story. And the analysis I did on the mortgage business was, well, this is kind of like doing rental homes, except it's much more scalable, it's more profitable, and there's way less risk. So it's actually a better version of what I'm doing already. And that was my pitch. And so I went out to raise money. Now, I did sell just about all my own, like all the cash in the business at the beginning was my cash. So the first loss was mine before any investor lost anything. And I went out pitching people for money, and I was just, you know, there's two things in this business. You raise a lot of money, then you need to get the loans fast, because you can't be sitting on people's cash and not invested. And in the first year, it took me, I think, 9 or 10 months to get that first deal that I'd been working on for 6 or 8 of those months across the line. So on the one hand, you've got to have the money. And then on the other hand, you've got to have the loans, because if you go out talking to someone who sells loans and say, look, I want to spend $2 million on loans, and you know, you run around doing due diligence and you get to the closing table and you don't actually have the $2 million, well, that damages your reputation to the same extent as it damages your reputation with your capital partners. You talk a great game about buying loans and, you know, producing great returns, but then you don't have the return, you don't have the loans. So you've got to have the loans and you've got to have the money. And that's just a delicate balancing act.
Right. Sure. So talking about, you know, kind of coming into it with fresher eyes, with what you might have done different, right? You know, we have so many really great listeners of the show that have, you know, kind of started with us from the beginning or just now jumping in, and they're really fresh. They're really new to the business, and they are working to kind of build those systems, and they're working to do these things. You know, for you, is there an 80-20 when it comes to starting? Is there like a most important thing when it comes to starting? You know, I know that there's obviously a ton of mistakes that can be avoided and other things like that. But you mentioned coming into the office every day, having that list of things you do, and then executing on whatever that's going to be. What are some of those things on that list that a lot of us can be doing better or add to our list to then be executing against?
Well, I think you need to break it into two. The first thing is just like the to-do list. And I'm terribly guilty of this. My to-do list can run to several pages, and that's just, you know, crazy because you're not going to get it all done. So I don't know where I picked this up, but I have my 1, my 3, and my 5. My 1 thing I'm definitely going to do today, my 3 things that I'll really, you know, make sure get done, but may not be completely complete, and my 5 things that I want to try and get done, and if I can, I will. And one of those things is like never go to sleep at night with email unactioned. So, and that can be really tough as you scale because we get a lot of email. So that's one thing. So that's just the basic planning. You've just got to keep on top of the basic planning, because once that stuff gets out of control, the whole business starts to spin. And then the second part is having systems for the day-to-day. And what I mean by that is you can get away with 5, 10, maybe 15 loans on a make it up as you go along basis, which is depending on who calls me, I'll do that. And if no one calls me, then it must be okay and I don't need to follow up. That is not the way to be a success in this business, no more than it is in single family home rental business. Well, if no one's calling me, then the house must be okay and everyone has paid their rent and all that stuff. It just doesn't work that way. So you need to be programmatic about everything. And that doesn't require, an awful lot of time and effort, but probably half a day a week we spend doing nothing but planning, which is what are the objectives on the portfolio? What are the objectives on the specific assets? And we have 2 asset managers and 1,500 loans to get through. So that's like, a minute alone and you only hit the high notes. And it's really trying to find issues. And the nature of this business is there's an infinite supply of issues and they come up at the worst possible time. So this morning we're selling a loan. We've owned it for 6 months. We bought it, we got it reperforming and we're selling it. The borrower has been paying for 6 months. And I just realized that the forbearance agreement or the mod actually was not signed. They're paying, but they didn't sign the agreement. Well, that's bad news. I need to get that signed like yesterday. And guess what? We can't get the borrower on the phone. So that was just bad work by me 6 months ago. You just can't have those issues because it holds up the whole deal.
Right. And I guess everyone is potentially going to have those different things for them, right? Like if you've got a business partner, if you've got someone that say is really amazing at analyzing deals, and you've got, like you mentioned, you're really great at going out there and doing that capital raising bit and doing that marketing side of it, or what is essentially the marketing side of it for us, right? And executing against what are your X's, your O's, and then trusting that other person, right? To be able to do that if you have that other person. And if you don't, then you do what you can, right? And like you said, you can have that 15, 20 deals and juggle it and it'll work. But it's still really important to kind of have those opportunities and have those kind of systems and things like that in place to kind of make that work. For you, looking at it from the perspective of someone who isn't necessarily buying hundreds of deals at a time, it's not just as hard to say buy 2 as it is to buy 20 as it is to buy 200. Where do you feel like people are stubbing their toes? Where do you feel like they might be making those mistakes in getting their first deal done, or in finally breaking, past, say, the 10 deal cap? Like, is it maybe mindset? Like you're coming from, say, a different place where you had 40 rentals yourself. You were doing reasonably well, though not CEO level well at Pepsi Co. Is it maybe a mindset thing? Where do you maybe see some people who are listening that aren't getting there yet? What might be tripping them up?
I think it's, it breaks down into a couple of different things, in my opinion. The first thing is, are you sure that you want to really do it? A lot of people like going for training courses and all that, but they never actually pull the trigger on a deal. And that's fine. I think you should just be honest with yourself. I'm here to learn. I'm not going to do any of these deals, but I like talking about them. And, it's some people like sport. I like talking about doing these deals. And that's fine. They get a buzz from the education, and that's terrific. There are other people, and we've seen this more recently when we started selling loans, where they ask a bunch of questions and then they submit extraordinarily low bids, which they know, I believe they've got. I mean, they couldn't not know that there's 0% chance of those bids being accepted, but they like the idea of having at least submitted a bid and it didn't work out. And so, those people, I think, probably need a partner, or they need someone to help them with just the confidence to move forward on something. And then people who get to 8, 9, 10 and then struggle after that, typically it's because they don't have the systems to follow up. So this is a follow-up business. If you're not terrific at following up, you're going to struggle at just keeping 10 deals on the rails at one time. And buying one loan is, in my opinion, just as hard as buying 100 loans. It's the exact same process. You can't have a different process for each one. So when we're buying a deal, we're going soup to nuts on every single one. And then you add up the answer at the end of the 100 loans, and that's what your bid price is on that pool. So I think it depends on where you are. The self-diagnosis is always difficult. And so I think, shows like yours where you can listen to other people who've been down the path that you're going down. A lot of the meetup groups, there's a bunch of training that goes on, different experts. People can kind of self-diagnose a little bit what their specific challenge is to get the thing over the line.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so
there's nothing.
You're saying you're going soup to nuts to each one. I mean, like so you're essentially saying it isn't different, right? Like it really isn't. I mean, get good at going zero, A to Z with one note, and it's just as easy going A to Z on two and buying two at a time, and then three, and then four, and then five. And and that success then potentially breeds obviously more success. You're able to go to other people that might have, say, a little bit more capital, whatever the case may be, and you've got this truckload of deals now, right? That you can speak to, right?
Yeah. I think the big mistake people make is, there's two themes that I see. One is someone saying, I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. Well, you're in the wrong business. This is a weeds. If you're not in the weeds, then who is? Maybe you have a partner who's in the weeds, but you need to be in the weeds. Now, I'm the guy who is not in the weeds, but someone is in the weeds on every single loan. We've a work paper with every single loan on it. I can tell you to the penny where we are on every loan and what the next step is and when it was last touched and what the borrower said and what the servicer said and everything like that. You've got to be on top of that because no one loves your kids like you do. And these loans are your kids. You've got to make sure they grow up okay. And so scaling up from 1 to 100 is about doing just the same things over and over, faster and faster. And as you scale, you can get vendors to help you with stuff. So it's not precisely the same 1 as 100, but the system is more or less the same. At the end, you want the output and you're doing the analysis on the output. You might need help with modeling. You might need help with some title work, whatever. And so you just get your vendors together for doing that. But going 1 to 5 to 10 to another 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, that's a totally doable kind of a scale up, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so the last time we got a chance to talk, you had this really great list. You had this. You had mentioned you were going to speak at this event, and you had put this. And I have, I come from a long background of presenters, of people that either made a profession of it or in somehow that's how they represented their company or whatever the case may be. My dad, his dad, that type of thing. And this is something I had never actually seen before. I thought this was genius. I'm sure others have done it, though I'm fully willing to give you first in history credit. But you went to this, you're at a real estate event and you basically put on the chairs, here's 20 questions, right? Like, ask me these questions about our business, right? As it were, if you can't think of anything else, right? Like during the Q&A, and used it as a way to spur, other people to kind of ask other questions that were coming to them. And there was one it wasn't necessarily a hidden gem in my opinion, but I just thought it was a really great way to look at something you mentioned earlier, which is deciding if this is something you really want to do. And one of the bullet points on that list, which by the way, I will upload the full list to the show notes over at notmba.com for anybody that wants to see them. But on the bullet, it mentioned what are the right objectives and measures for the first 12 months, 36 months, and 60 months. So I want to know the answer to that. Yep. But I also thought it was unique in kind of a unique way. We always talk about goals and also setting the right objectives and measures for yourself and what you, not just the business, right? But what are you seeing in 12 months and 36 months and 60 months for yourself, for your business and all that kind of stuff? So I'd love to know that, right objectives and measures for that particular question. But I just thought it was so great that was another piece and a component that you included on that list.
Well, thank you. The reason I did it was because I do a bit of speaking and there's always a Q&A at the end. And particularly with people who are coming from real estate as opposed to note people, or people who've just got a couple of notes, who don't have a lot of system mentality, and they're, as I say, kind of making it up, ad hoc as they go along, which is fine with up to 5 loans. You shouldn't go too far wrong with 5 because you can remember, what happened yesterday on 5 loans. But on 500 loans, you certainly can't. And so, the questions that were coming up were were kind of the wrong questions. And the people were asking the wrong questions because they didn't know what the right questions were. And so looking back, and while it was fresh in my mind from the growth we'd gone through, I pulled those questions together, and that helped the conversation. And I've used it a couple of times now, and each time it's been pretty helpful. And with smaller groups, it really depends on what the type of group is. Some people are buying loans. Like I buy the loans. I'm very clear on what I want to do. I want 100% of my loans to start performing again. I don't ever want to foreclose. I don't want ever to end up, with real estate. I want them to reperform, and I want to season them for 6 to 12 months, and I want to sell them to someone who, wants 10% or 12% return. And that's the best outcome for the homeowner, and that's the best outcome for the investor, and that's the best outcome for all parties involved. Some people don't want that. Some people want to foreclose to get the real estate, and so that's a different set of goals, and is, in my opinion, less scalable than what I'm trying to do, which is to keep everyone in the home, get them back performing again, and come up with a creative loan mod and service them off into the future. So. That's the first thing. The second thing is it depends on how ambitious you are or how much time you want to spend. Some people want to, have a more of a lifestyle-based business where they're traveling a lot, doing whatever it is they want. Maybe they're semi-retired or retired. They don't want to spend 80 or 90 hours a week on it like crazy people like us. So, work back from what does life look like in 3 years? And that will then help you map out what you need to be doing today and tomorrow and in a week and in 3 weeks. And at the end of the year, how many loans will you have owned? And if that means you need to own 500 loans, well, you better get moving because
better get to work, huh?
it's hard to buy 500 loans. Even if you have 500, if you've identified 500 that are for sale, there's quite a lot of negotiation to do to get from even agreeing the price to getting the deal closed. Probably 30% of our sales, 40% of our sales fall out post pricing, just for one reason or another.
Yeah, and that's going to be, somebody's funding maybe backed out, or there's a collateral issue that you weren't aware. There's all kinds of reasons why, even after, say, a bid's been accepted, everything's, everybody's ready to rock and roll, and then out of nowhere, you're like, oh, geez, I thought we were moving forward with this. I've been there. I know most of the people that are veteran listeners of the show have been there. And that's absolutely right? Even when it's not like going and buying a carton of milk, right? Like, just pick it up on the shelf. This is what I want. Here's what I'm paying, and moving on down the road. I like to look at it as a function of exactly what you just mentioned, right? It's in, X amount of time, let's say, starting today, even if you were to just say starting today, my income is X, right? Let's say it's someone like yourself who is, say, in a corporate job somewhere, and they get paid $100,000 a year, right? So then they run that backwards, and they go, well, if my average rental / loan mod is $500 a month, then I need X deals, right? And then kind of working all that backwards, and they go, okay, so now I need this amount of deals, and you go, well, if I'm using any sort of outside money, what's that costing me? So then it's not really $500. Let's say it's all 50-50 equity, right? Or something, or, a scenario where you're paying 6% on the money or whatever, but really getting extremely granular about that. And then you end up in a space that you were talking about where you're like, I need to have a portfolio of, let's call it 100 notes. If I'm expecting, this way or that way for me to have acquired this money or whatever. Yeah. And then you can go, okay, so 100, and I want to be out in 3 years. So that means now I've got to do 33 a year roughly, and like really breaking it down. I find that to be the best way to really, it's essentially, right, like how to eat the elephant, right? One bite at a time. But that's great. But when you actually put it in practice and put it on paper, I think it becomes so much more actionable, for you and your business and all that type of stuff.
You don't need to be, you don't need to be an Excel wizard to figure out, to map out on one page of Excel what you've just spoken about. And I think that when you get to the model, which, you outlined, it was exactly what I did. It's not the plan, it's the planning that really counts, because we ended up doing something different than what the plan said, but that's,
I've never I will officially give you credit, first person in history. I've never heard anyone say it's not the plan, it's the planning. That's fantastic. That might be my entire life now. Like, I think that is such a great, succinct way of, thinking through, let's say, even if it's like a weight loss goal, right? Or some sort of fitness goal. And then, you flip the script and you're like, well, I'm going to start running instead of swimming or what, like, but the planning and the intensity and the passion that you put behind the effort, sometimes is obviously going to, or should, supersede that plan sometimes if you decide to go a different route and it makes more sense to go this way or that way or whatever the case may be, for sure.
You go back to review your plan and you're either ahead or behind, and you can say, well, why am I behind? Well, I'm behind because it just was way harder to raise capital than I thought. And it's usually, this business is a capital constrained business because you're buying things that are relatively easy to buy. To find loans and buy them is not that difficult. The hard part is the capital and the management post-purchase. That's the hard part in my view.
So I don't want to necessarily super interject there, but that's one of the biggest hurdles we hear the most is the where to buy. Now, quick caveat and full disclosure, Paul Birkett, Automation Finance, they will definitely sell you a loan. So we'll talk a little bit more about what you guys do and what you do in the market in terms of sourcing deals and things like that for people that do want to buy. But for that average person, that's one of the biggest hurdles we hear about. What is it? Why is it, aside from maybe capital or experience in your position, that you're like, man, buying it's simple. It's the after purchase. Is it just experience? I mean, is that really it?
Well, I think it comes down to goals. What are you trying to get done here? I see two things that we see a lot, and we're a relatively new seller. There are other sellers who would have a lot more data to base this on. So we regularly turn down bids from buyers because they're too high. And that seems weird. It didn't seem weird to me, but when I told other people that, they kind of were amazed. If I sell you a loan at a price that you bid too high on, particularly if you're a newer investor, because we sell a lot to newer investors, the outcome is you're not going to make any money. You're going to work on it for a year and get your money back, or maybe even lose money if you're so new you don't know what you're doing. And you may or may not be able to raise money again and buy more loans. If you are able to raise money and buy more loans, you are certainly not going to buy them from us. So,
the math makes sense there.
It doesn't make much sense to try and hit a home run on every sale. We don't attempt to do that. We offer our entire portfolio for sale, and indeed 2 weeks ago had a bid on the entire portfolio. I was almost out of business. And as a funny aside, one of the things that you'll do in due diligence is provide all of the servicing notes for the prospective buyer, and they'll want to go through and see, make sure everything's compliant and do all of their due diligence. And one of the things I didn't think of was the reaction that our servicer would give me when I asked them for a pull of all servicing notes on all loans for a possible note sale, because we're a relatively large client.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They were getting a little bit nervous about keeping the lights on a certain part of their portfolio. But the challenge for people trying to scale up is they try and hit the ball out of the park, and that's not what this business is about. Hitting a home run probably means you're taking on too much risk. Mm-hmm. So what most investors are looking for is, a high single-digit return. Most people, if they could get a high single-digit return on their money and it was secure, they'd be very, very happy. Once you get into double digits, people get very nervous about, 12, 13, 14. I see people send me even emails. They buy a loan from me and then they do an email blast saying make 15% return. And I'm thinking, well, I sold them the loan and I don't see how you could make 15% return, on this. So that's, you're going to disappoint people. And so if you raise money from somebody and then disappoint them, guess what? They're not going to invest with you.
They're not coming back.
So you've got to I would rather do 20 deals and make 10% on each one of them than hit the ball out of the park. I don't understand what the fixation is with these enormous returns people think are possible. And so I went and pulled the data because I thought maybe I'm just crazy, right? So the if you go to urban.org, which is part of HUD, I believe, it's a public kind of think tank, and Dan Magner from Carrington Mortgage and one of the guys from Urban Organization did an analysis on all of the HUD pools that have been sold. And the average IRR, excuse me, on a short sale is about 11%. The average on a mod's about 10, and the average on a foreclosure is about 5. And so, they are the numbers. That's the unlevered return. If you can get a 10% return in 4 or 5 months, you've made an IRR of 45%. No one is going to need more money than 45% IRR. That's just incredible. So get in, get the loan, get the borrower reperforming, sell the loan. That's the name of the game. Or hold it long term for your retirement account or whatever. But, depending on what you're doing. But the key thing is people make overly aggressive promises and then fail to deliver and wonder why they can't raise more money. Right.
And this is something I've been talking about in, not back channels, not like it's some secretive thing, but just with other investors and, everybody, I think, and I think rightfully so, maybe you might disagree, but I think you should always be trying to, obviously, maximize returns, what have you, but have a baseline, right? Like, I'm not going to do the deal if, Paul's selling it for X. If I buy it for Y and it's below Z, I can't do the deal. Like, it doesn't make sense for numerous reasons, right? There's too much risk on my part because my return would be too low that if something goes catastrophically wrong, you know what I mean? Those types of things. Yep. So there is a certain targeting that needs to be done there. However, I feel that target number for so many people is just way too high. Yep. Like, I get it. Your time is worth whatever. And, all of these other things. I definitely understand it. But I think the component that a lot of people miss, and again, correct me if I'm wrong or if this is in the ballpark of what it is that you're talking about as we stay with this baseball analogy. If I do a deal with someone and the total return is, say, 22% or something like that, right? Over the course of, say, a year. They get 12, I get 10, or whatever the case may be. Their 12 is a true 12, and that's fantastic. That's better than what they got last year, guaranteed in the market, that type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned, that's well above the single digit that a lot of people would love to see, right? Mm-hmm. And I got 10. My 10's not really 10, because if that was, say, obviously their money, because they're in the deal as well, if I put almost minimal capital in to the point of no capital, my return is technically infinite, right? If you're doing the real mathematical numbers of it. Now, obviously, I have to pay for my time, and obviously, I have to do all that kind of stuff. But if you're doing multiple deals like that, and as you should, right, as you grow and scale and what have you, your 10 isn't really 10. It's a lot more than that, and it continues to scale, and it allows you to continue to do other things. So I just feel like some people have a strange expectation, maybe is the way to look at it. And I don't know if that's necessarily what you're talking about, but that's kind of the way I've seen it. They don't do the planning that we talked about earlier about I need to make X, to make what is essentially my income now. They don't. If you don't ever define what that number is, the answer is always more. And so they want, their baseline is, well, if he's selling it at X and I buy it at Y and it's not above 35% on the back, I can't do the deal. That's crazy, right? Like, is that kind of what you're referring to?
That's exactly what I'm referring to. You won't buy any loans.
Yeah.
So that's just the
essentially
reality.
Right.
You won't get any loans. And your 10, I mean, the world and the universe doesn't care what you used to earn in your old job.
No.
So what you're doing is you're getting into this new business, and the beauty of the business is there's plenty of product supply. You can build a track record, and you can put together a PowerPoint with page after page after page after page after page of 12% return, 13% return, 16% return, 9.5% return. And after your investors are bored looking at pictures of houses with mid-teens returns, they get the picture, because for them 8% or 10% or 11% is a terrific return, and you seem to be able to do it day after day after day. and you're, as you correctly say, infinite return on your zero investment, but you get a 10 points in the deal. Well, if you're doing 40 a year or 50 a year, which is totally doable, that adds up to, a decent chunk of change, and you're bringing the expertise and no capital. That seems like a decent trade.
Oh, it's an incredible trade. So again, to me, it just is one of those things where I think, and it was the conversation I was having with some other people that were seasoned, and many of which were more seasoned than me. So I did, I took a step back just to go, here's something I've been thinking about with definitely some more seasoned people at the table. And I just said, the way I'm seeing it, the way, a lot of people are complaining about no product in the market, or, everything's too expensive, or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, These are all still cheaper than if I went to the county steps and I bought it 75% of ARV. And then I still had to go do the work and swing my own hammer. And, and there's definitely still potentiality for, walking into a situation that might not be super great with a note, right? As there would be if you walked into something you knew was going to be a fix and flip, where there's definitively going to be a fixed part. But still, it's still cheaper than that 75, 80% that I'm having to buy out over here. So it just was a really interesting, I feel like, the root of it was bad expectations. And then the on top of that was people just not wanting to take the action.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mystery too. And just even yesterday, I sold a loan for $35,000, and it had a tax certificate on it. And the guy who bought the tax certificate paid $45,000 or $46,000. And so the guy with the tax certificate thought he was getting a great deal, but he paid 25% more. He paid 25% more than, the note price.
Yeah, sure.
It's just, that's just the nature of the business. I don't really understand why people say there's no product. There's a lot of product. There may not be product in Southern California at 50 cents. I think maybe, there's that kind of, that product only existed for 6 months, and it wasn't available to the man in the street. It was available to, giant hedge funds.
Yeah, the guy buying $1 billion worth of that, 50% in California.
Yeah, exactly.
No, listen, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
So, I think that the key focus in being good at this is being able to get in, buy it at a reasonable price, make your return, fix the loan or fix the property, short sale, whatever, and get out quickly. This is about a speed of execution more than it is about, if I could get it for $600 less or $200 less or $1,000 less. If that's what your business is dependent on, you don't really have a business.
Paul Birkett dropping some serious bombs on the Note MBA podcast. I love it. I don't want to bogart too much more of your time. I do appreciate you jumping on the phone with me here. Is there, aside from obviously giving all of the great resources that you guys have and websites and emails and all that kind of stuff, I definitely want people to connect with you. You're just a great guy running a great business. I love it. But any last parting shots? I mean, we definitely have a bell curve, as it were, when it comes to a listenership. We have those people that are, just brand spanking new. And then we have some real veterans that have, closed on 200 deals in the past 3 years type people. So, parting shots for people just generally speaking, but maybe more towards that, the XY meeting access, the new / not quite as experienced individuals.
I think for the new guys, you need to make sure you understand exactly what you're doing before you do it. And that's kind of a contradiction, because you can only learn by doing. So certainly for your first couple of deals, buy something that there's a lot of. So a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Ohio for $75,000. Buy a few of those for $35,000 or $40,000, whatever you can buy them for, and work them through the process and just get comfortable with what you're doing and figure out each time, not how could you make more money, figure out how could I do it faster? Because the making more money is not going to happen that much. You're limited by what these assets are finally going to be worth. Really, where you can add excellence to what you're doing is in making the process friction-free, or as friction-free as possible, and just get it done quickly. And I would say that's the first thing. And the second thing is, practice what you preach. And what I mean by that is, like our entire portfolio is for sale, and we will sell it. We mark everything up 5 to 10%, and we put it out to the market. And each month we sell 3 to 5% of all the loans that we own. And typically they're the ones that we've owned for the least amount of time. Because each month you own a loan, the value of it may go up, may go down, but the amount of money you invest in it goes up as you start foreclosure, as you advance taxes, and so on. Mm-hmm. So you need to be prepared to buy it, get it fixed as quickly as possible, and sell it. That is the way the biggest hedge funds in the world operate. That's the way the most successful small investor will operate too. You need to get your systems as strong as you can possibly get them. If you don't have great systems, get a partner who's a systems thinker and work through with them. And you'll find two things. One, you'll find that the stress of running the business is actually quite low because you've got a program for each loan that you own. And you'll also find that raising capital is easier because people will see that you're able to buy a loan that's troubled, fix it, and sell it at a margin in relatively short period of time and return the investor their money. And at the end of the day, that's all the investor cares about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And one last thing before you kind of give everybody the digital footprint where they can get in contact with you and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that I heard you talk about that I thought was a fantastic, not necessarily a contrarian viewpoint, just a lot of people are really quick, especially in today's market, across many different disciplines, to jump on the outsourcing bandwagon or the VA bandwagon or these types of things. And all of that stuff is great, right, for setting up the systems, for increasing speed and all those kinds of things. But one of the things that you mentioned, when I saw you talk about this, was that it is important, though, to know what you don't know and not be so quick to think about, oh, well, I could outsource this or I could outsource that or I could this or I could that. Really get an understanding, get your hands in the dirt, cultivate, grow your own crop first, and then outsourcing becomes infinitely easier, not only because you can then educate better, right? But then you also know if someone's turning in crap to you. And that sounds so intuitive, but so few people talk about it in that way, that it was really refreshing to kind of hear you talk about it, in what is essentially the most intuitive way to think about it. But I just feel like a lot of people are so quick to jump on that outsourcing, type bandwagon or VA or type situation when, they literally have no days in the business. I'll be talking to someone who's just getting in, like, oh, okay, so it looks like I can outsource this and outsource. And I'm like, do you even know what that means? Like, if they turned you in, this type of Excel spreadsheet or this type of file or this type of thing, would you even know what you're looking at? Like, it's crazy to me how quickly people try to jump on the I don't want to do the work, train before they even know what they're looking at. And so not that we had obviously dove into that at all in this. I just wanted to kind of, commend you for that bit and see if you had any other, thoughts on it. But it just was a really, like I said, not super contrarian because it seems so simplistic and so obvious, but just so few people talk about it in that way. I just thought it was fascinating.
Well, I think if you're you can be irresponsible with your own money. That's up to you.
Certainly.
With other people's money, if you're going to outsource things, you can't outsource doing the work. And the stuff that people outsource is doing the work. So if you get a tape scrubbed for taxes, for example, we do all of that in-house. And the reason we do it in-house, we get title reports in O&E and to check the taxes, and then we check them again. Why would we waste our time checking the taxes that the best title company that we've been able to find provides that at a service, at a price? Why would we then go and do all of that work again? It seems crazy, right? And the reason is we do it is because the person who provides us with the taxes gets them from a person in a local county office. And depending on how motivated that person feels and how good they are at their job is how accurate the number you get. And often the number is wrong, and it can be wrong by tens of thousands or hundreds, or it can be bang on. You just never know. So it's just one of those risks. You always want to be identifying and eliminating risk. And outsourcing actually brings in more risk. So if you're working 100 hours a week and you're scaling and everything's going perfectly, maybe that's a good time to start thinking about outsourcing. But you make sure that you know precisely what you're doing before you tell someone else to do it for you.
Exactly. I love that. We always like to talk about I want to get it printed on a shirt. It's so important. It's the trust but verify. Look, I believe you. I'm just going to double check it. Thanks. And we do the same thing, though not nearly at the scale that you guys do, which I love. So where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? Obviously, all the links to kind of everything we've talked about, including that great, kind of questionnaire, which is really awesome, will all be over at the website, notmba.com. Everything that he mentions here will be over there as well. But where can they connect with you, Paul?
I think I should take over from Robert. I could be a radio DJ star.
Listen, man, you bring a lot to the table. You bring a certain wit and charisma to the table that I adore. I think it's fantastic. It's almost like, though obviously a little different. We got Ireland and Britain. It's the UK very different. It's almost like having a show with like John Oliver. Just I get to rap with John Oliver once a week. I could do that. I think I wouldn't mind that.
I think you, me, and Conor McGregor.
That man is a beast.
Trifera. I think it could be great. I think this could be a big idea.
I listen. He is a monster. That guy is truly a remarkable human being. And if you don't know who he's talking about, you are doing yourself a disservice. That man is amazing.
Yeah, I think he's an after the watershed kind of a guy though. So we probably shouldn't talk too much. But you gotta like your mixed martial arts for that.
Absolutely.
I'm not particularly active on the digital front. I guess the automationfinance.com is the website. If people are interested in buying loans, they can register there and take a look. We send out a pool of the lower value loans that a lot of people like every month. 2 out at the moment, 2 pools, and that's probably the best thing to do is just go to the website. I'm on LinkedIn and all that stuff, but the website's probably the best way.
Absolutely, and they head over there, and the process is fairly simple. I mean, it's the NDA, and then I think that's it. What's the next step after that, right?
Yeah, that's it. Just get registered and NDA, then we'll send you the tape. And please don't rebroker the tapes. I don't want to buy my own loans back at a margin. Thanks.
It's a weird place to find yourself in, right? See those circular deals come back. And you're like, wait, isn't that? Hey Chuck, don't we actually own that? This is weird. It's a little strange. I do agree with you. Thank you so much for joining us in New York, the rainy New York City. I appreciate you so much for jumping on the horn with us. As always, guys, be sure to head over to notmba.com. Check out the show notes over there. We'll have a link over to Automation Finance. We'll have links out to the urban.org. Obviously, you can download this great questionnaire that he has. You can use this for your own benefit as well as firing off emails to him in case I didn't ask the question that is burning a hole in your pocket. You can definitely do that. As always, if this is your first time checking us out over on iTunes, be sure to give us a rating, a review, and subscribe. We love that. And be sure to tell 5 other people this week about the Note MBA podcast.